1, 2, 3, 4.
Back to It's Not a Sport, Season 4. Don't know what episode this is because we're coming back from a long break and things are going to be a little mixed up, especially with all the news. But however, for this episode, we have a very special guest, Carlos. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Excited to be.
So the last time you were on this show was actually in Season 2. And we talked about Avengers Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was a really fun episode. I think one of the best episodes in that season. And here, this week's topic, we're going to talk about game design at DePaul since we are both graduating this year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming up on our senior capstone project, which is our big project for, if anyone knows, it's like our thesis paper. So I thought that we would look back, go on our experiences, and just talk about the curriculum overall, what we thought about it, and if we answered the major question that do we feel prepared going into the gaming industry coming out of graduation. So with that, further ado, let's talk about our first year of game design, which is actually when we met in, I believe, fundamentals of game design. Do you remember that class?
I remember the people, not too much of the content, unfortunately.
That's when we made the so that class I liked a lot, and that was because the teacher was really good. That was the class where we made the board game.
Oh, okay. No, so this class I do remember. I'm confusing with a different class. So yeah, that one had forget our professor. Was it Mikels or something like that, right? It was something.
Yeah.
It was something Nordic. But yeah, that was, in my opinion, one of the best classes that actually like aided me in terms of like game design, in terms of preparing me to like really evaluate a project. That was like one of the classes where every single time you made a design decision, the professor would ask you and really prod out of you why you were doing something and assist you into how you should actually be like evaluating adding something to a game. Like we had like fun projects like to remove the randomness or to adjust the game with randomness, such as like it was they had a couple. They had rock paper scissors, or it would be either war in card games, and then there was one more where like we had to rebalance a game not around randomness. And yeah, that was just a really fun project. I don't know how you felt about that one.
I agree. Like that was the class that was, and I think mostly it's to the teacher. I don't know how it is now, but that was the class we were really introduced to game design. We learned about design pillars in that class. We did, yes, he always asked us like why we were doing things that we did, and arguably that was one of the funnest games like we developed over, I think, the course of DePaul. At least for me, that board game was a lot of fun to develop. And for context, our board game was just like, it was essentially a life simulator where you played a character. It's been so long, I don't remember. I just remember you were going around like working jobs, and we made up with like really fun mini games. One of the really cool mini games that you actually came up with was that you put a bunch of like paper pins in like a can.
Oh yeah.
And you put them around rubber bands, and you had to like pick them up. That was really smart of you. So that was really good. Moving on from that class, which was probably the highlight of our first year, we had playgramming, game development 1, and then kind of like small other, they don't really matter, intro to visual design, and then 3D design and modeling. And then what I really want to talk about was game literacy, because this is where we had such a positive and fundamentals of game design. We had such a, for me, a negative in games literacy. So what are your thoughts on game literacy? If you need a reminder, I'll remind you too.
On games literacy, I think that the core problem was there were interesting questions posed in terms of like understanding what a game is and understanding a little bit about like how games work from like their core philosophy. But the
Hmm.
problem was, aside from just asking the super broad questions of like what exactly is a game, and also questions like, oh well, what makes something that some people would see as a task versus some people would see as a game. They would ask that question, ask us to answer something like that. But there was no real there was no real deep dive into like what implications that has. So like if we're asking a question of what is a game, and then we learned about there's like one interesting thing. It was like the magic circle, and it was one guy's interpretation of what a game actually is. And like anything goes
Right.
within the
Yeah.
purview of that magic circle would be a game, but stuff that like tends to leave that purview of the circle would not be seen as a game. And then there's also the Sid Meier's definition of a game. That's like a game is it's like a concrete set of rules with a evolving objective or something like that. Um, which is like fine and interesting to like talk about, but it doesn't really that lesson or that talking point is not molded into something that we can really absorb and use, because we talked a lot about art in obscure games, not about like traditional games. And like there's room to talk about art, like we talked about Yoko Ono's chessboard, which was nothing but pieces that were all the same color. And like I
Right.
get like we talked about like, oh well, is this technically a game? And I'm like, well, I see exactly what they're trying to say. That's like it's a chess is like a combat territorial uh like game. But if they're all the same color, you kind of like lose which pieces are yours while you play the game. And it's kind of like a commentary about like we're fighting, but in reality we're the same thing, and it kind of gets like muddied in gray waters and stuff like that. But then like it leads me to be like, what am I supposed to extract on that in terms of when I'm thinking about how to create a game, or like an interesting game or introspective game? Like it would always just be like, well, that's up to your interpretation. And it's like, but we're not learning the schools of thought. Like in other philosophy classes, we learn about schools of thoughts and how they apply those beliefs, like consequentialist versus moral realist and stuff like that, and how those schools of thoughts work. And then we look at a situation and we observe that situation through those schools of thoughts. We were not given any schools of thoughts as to what a game was. We were sort of just told, oh well, you come up with your interpretation, and then here's a bunch of random stuff that I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to make it seem as if it's deep and complex. But in reality, we're not really having any discussion. We're just reading PowerPoints off of a slide. I guess that's the best way I could describe that class.
I think everything you said was correct there. It's a very heavy philosophy class that questions a lot, like what is a game, is this a game, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very hard to take that knowledge and apply it. That's the weird thing of like, I think the difference between like what we had in fundamentals of game design and what we have in game literacy, where we took the knowledge and we applied it to our own game that we were making the process. But in game literacy, we didn't make a game. From what I hear and what I talk to about people with game literacy, it's one of the more useless classes that no one really understands what they learned from it. And here's my story of it. So the night before the finals, okay, I stood up all night, like I didn't go to sleep. And I woke and it was time to go to school, so I got up and I caught the train and I went down to fucking downtown campus, right? And I was so tired. I just bought a Coke, and all I had was just like that Coke in me for caffeine, and that was it. And then she asked me to give a presentation about something, like it was anything. I think I gave a presentation about like the Nintendo Switch or something like that, and I was the first one to do it, and I ended up like passing the class with an A. Like that's how bad and like zero tolerance I cared for that class. So with that out of the way, game literacy, let's move on to our second year, which I think things start to pick up a lot more, especially in Game Development 2, I believe we took together.
Mhm.
This was the class we designed Black Friday Blitz, which was a very interesting experience. So for context, Black Friday Blitz was essentially a Plants vs Zombies clone that a couple of us developed. Carlos, you were the lead coder. How was that for you?
So Black Friday Blitz sort of it was my I guess calling to basically focus a lot more on programming.
Mm-hmm.
Um because like I fiddled around with some programming in Game Dev 1, which was pretty fun. It being more of like a workshop class in terms of like, you don't necessarily have to have a finished project your first time really making a game. So kind of like feel free to like explore, and if like you make something that's broken, that's fine. Like you're just getting some experience under your belt with this engine game maker. And then in Game Dev 2, uh, it became very apparent that our our at least sort of section of people at DePaul were experiencing the pains of the current curriculum not having a lot of programming classes, or I guess
Yes.
not having a lot of programming
Yes.
students. Because there is a game programming degree that has
There
different
is.
classes that I've looked at that all seem like they're teaching you very good stuff that you can actually apply in a lot of these. But I don't know if maybe there was just a lack. It really felt like there was 90% designers and then 10% programmers in our classes most of the time. And out of that 10% of programmers, it w- I was a designer that had to sort of just be thrown into the programming role, which was stressful um to a certain extent, but it was also eye opening in another extent, because when it really this class, and when you're dealing with programming, I feel really hammers the home the idea of what you have to do when going to any university. And this is like advice that everybody should receive, is that you are going to have to learn how to Google something on your own. And the best that your professors will try to do for you in terms of help is like give you a hint as to what you're going to Google, which I don't know if this is necessarily how it should be, because I see the benefits in a professor teaching you how to do something, or also a
Self
professor
research.
yeah, like, or a professor telling you how to self-research something. There's like a little bit of column A, column B that like intersect in there, and so there's the middle ground is probably where you'll find the correct answer is how this to go. But for most of the things, especially in programming, because it's sometimes hard to relate your ideas, especially if your designers don't necessarily have any coding experience as to how they want you to program a behavior in a game. So take for example, like if we have like a Super Mario like game, or yeah, actually let's just take in Black Friday Blitz. We have like characters of various different mobs that are walking down a sort of Plants vs Zombies like style. So we have like a normal one, like a just a default walking. We have a tanky one. And then we had this interesting one that was a mother that had their children in front of them. And if you killed the children, the mother would become enraged and charge with a bit more health, a bit more speed, and a bit more damage. And when you're sort of trying to design for that, you have broad points that can almost be like storyboard points or sticky notes. That's like, if the children are gone, the mother becomes enraged. Well, then what does enraged really mean? Well, enraged means that they get, I don't know, like a little bit
I
more
think it was
damage.
like movement speed or
Yeah,
something.
like they can
Like
get
they
increased
went
movement speed and
faster
stuff
in
like
our
that.
game.
But like, how
Yeah.
much movement speed should that be? Or like, how much
Right.
damage should that be? When they're
Right.
charging, should it be like a build up or a wind down? And at this point, I don't really blame the designers at all, because I didn't even know these questions, because I was also trying to help with the design, and they don't know how to sort of like describe that. It's like, okay, so we probably should try to come up with like, how might this work, and we should probably all be working in tandem together, like at the same screen, maybe like, or have some sort of parameter that we can just adjust on the fly to test out which way it works, whether a straight speed gain works, or like a gradual speed increase, or like a blip charge or something like that. And like stuff like that sort of just speaks to like, you're gonna fail a lot and your games are gonna be buggy and you're gonna be frustrated, but because of that frustration you're gonna learn, oh, we could do this next to be way better. So like, for example, like I guess what I'm really trying to say is that like, as a programmer, I learned how to communicate to a designer how to necessarily tell a programmer what needs to be inputted into a mechanic or a game. And I think vice versa, a programmer learns how to communicate with a designer better that way, in having that sort of team like experience. Um Yeah, I don't know how you felt about it because you were heavier on the design side, and I was sort of on the programming side, frantically googling how to do everything in this engine.
So yes, I agree. I remember you as the lead coder, and Jamie and Tommy as kind of the designers, having kind of butt heads a little bit, I think, in what they wanted to do. Because I remember Jamie and Tommy saying like they had nothing to really do, and you just being frustrated trying to figure out how to code it. And I kind of leave this to me because I was the producer, and I didn't really step up until I think later in the project. And I think that was because, again, like you said, you can't blame the designers for knowing like what enrage is. We didn't learn those type of technicalities as game designers overall until I think later, until really our third year, where you get into like advanced game design, you get into like business games, game production, and stuff like that, and you kind of learn more about the workflow of a designer.
Mm-hmm.
And a coder and an artist and etc. So now things, I think, graduating are a lot smoother than when we made Black Friday Blitz. I should have maybe designed the game, I don't know, a little bit better, because I think, again, like there was a lot of loss in translation. Our artists did a great job, I think, overall.
Oh yeah.
But behind the scenes, the project was a mess, and I should have helped you with coding too. I remember we had a lot of problems with source control, I think, with that project at first.
Oh yeah.
Which was a pain. Source control is always a pain.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think these are things that, like, the teacher we had for this, fuck is his name? Forget his name.
Professor
But
Turner.
I've had him like a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Turner. We're about to have him for this capstone too, I think. I don't think he's that. He's not that good at like setting that things up. He's good at like telling you like alternatives to solve problems, but I don't think he's good at like pointing those problems out and like kind of pre-planning for them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think overall it was definitely an accomplishment for what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a real trial and error, as it should be in our second year. Now, in the curriculum that I was telling you earlier that we see, they have Unreal Engine Workshop and Unity Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
For my first introduction to Unity was practical scripting, and my first introduction to Unreal was intro to level design, I think.
Yeah.
Which I took last year during the pandemic.
Which that being your intro to Unreal, I think, is a real problem in the curriculum that thankfully they have now corrected to actually having a workshop for Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like that. I think that really like sort of talks about the problem that we had, the way they had the curriculum set up, is that the curriculum is set up with this idea that you have been a hobbyist since like high school, and that you have worked with all these game engines for a long time and are now entering your degree, I guess, with the prerequisite knowledge of how to use each of those engines, which I think is wrong, because I only had experience with Unity. I didn't really have experience with like Game Maker or Unreal, and it would have been nice to sort of have a class that works in tandem with it together. Because like for like 3D animation stuff like that, sorry, this is getting a little ahead. They expect that you're coming in with no experience of that program, but yet they're still teaching you fundamentals of animation modeling while teaching you like a program like Autodesk Maya, and even a little bit of Blender in some classes. If there's crossover, they tell you like you can either work on this or this program or that program, which I think would have been a lot nicer if we had it for Unreal or Unity.
Yeah, especially because they're such a major part, like other than like coding, it's such a major part of what we're doing. Like those are our main programs that we're always going to be working in, and it coming in like so late and being introduced to it very random like we were is bad, especially because now Unreal Engine 5's out, so a lot of people are going to be, or the early access version is out. So a lot of people are now learning and messing with that and those systems. And both programs work differently. They work on different languages. Some do, Unreal does a lot more things for you than Unity does. And I feel like I really didn't learn this stuff until the pandemic hit, which is like in our third year, which we'll get to in a bit, skipping forward. However, a side note for a capstone, what do you think about working in Unreal Engine 5?
Wait, can you say the last part again? My headphones lost you.
What do you think about working in Unreal Engine 5 for a capstone? Would you be down to do that?
The that's an unfortunate thing because Unreal Engine 5 is really interesting, but when it comes to a capstone, when this is like a final piece of work to sort of show like that, like, hey, I'm ready. Like it's supposed to be a stepping stone. That's essentially like that you can show in your portfolio. Like this is what I did in my final year, or as part of my final part of my 300 level game class, and you can see the evolution in my work from my portfolio. I think that if we were to jump into Unreal 5, that would be bad because we would be learning a lot. We wouldn't just be because I know a little bit of Unreal, but we would just be learning the whole new systems of Unreal 5 as well as the workflow that is involved in that, and sort of like taking on a lot of that new knowledge while we're already so limited in time with our trimester system. That would not necessarily be like a best use of. I think we would probably be better off to either Unreal as it is right now, or like moving forward with Unity or gaming.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a very good point that I was forgetting about. 10 weeks is not enough time to make a game. Most of the games that we've made has been in 10 weeks, which is ridiculous.
Well, more like it's more like 8 weeks because we have like the 2 weeks of like syllabus stuff and then like getting everything set up.
Yeah. Like it's actually impressive the quality of games that I think we've made in really 8 weeks. And that's why this capstone is going to be very interesting. And maybe we'll do a follow-up episode after we finish our capstone and graduate. But now we're going to have, 16 weeks total to make a full game. Yeah. And it's going to be very interesting to see what we come out with. So one of the last classes that was our last class together, actually, before we went into lockdown, pandemic-wise, was game production. What did you think of game production? Because this was one of my favorite classes of being at DePaul so far.
So, remind me, game production involved, was it, remind me a little bit of what game production was. There's like 2 classes I have that have production. So
game production was the class where we had to make a educational game for those kids. That's what the teacher had us do, and we did a lot of stuff with Scrum and product backlogs and learned a lot about that. We had that guest speaker come in and she talked to us for a minute.
Oh, okay, I got you. I remember Jamie more because he was in my group for that.
He was in your group. Yeah, you guys were working on that like spider like game where you solve math problems and you like explore a cave. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, that class was pretty cool. It's kind of sad at the end for me though because that was a situation where I had like Jamie was the only person that was actually like really helping me out in terms of doing stuff. So I was like pretty overworked in that game and doing a lot of stuff. And like on the second to last day, actually I think on the last day of class before like COVID had shut down the world, I missed class because I had just overslept. I came home, and I wanted to take a quick nap before class, and I just overslept so past the scheduled time, and like I emailed him saying like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I just felt horrible. I wanted to see if it was like I was lack of sleep. I don't, because he had a big rule that was like, this was even before the pandemic, which he was like forward thinking. Now I think about it, where it's like, hey, if you feel sick, don't come in because I don't want you spreading your sickness to any of these people who all have deadlines.
Right.
All got
I remember that.
And
I remember that.
And like I felt bad, but I was like, this is probably because I just stayed up for like 18 hours trying to figure out how to like code this like very on rails game because I was so inexperienced with Sharp at that time. And I was like, okay, I want to make sure that it's just lack of sleep, so I'm just gonna sleep. I slept in, and then I missed it, and like I don't know why. In my head, I always assume the worst. So like I kind of feel like he was disappointed that I wasn't there on the final playtesting days.
Mhm.
Especially because apparently my team just did not know how to use version control, so they didn't know how to pull down the latest build, and they all kind of just had to
Mhm.
like sit out. And he didn't like return my emails for like a couple of days, and then when he did, it was like, oh, I'll see you at the presentation for the educational game. And then obviously we never got to present the educational because everywhere was shutting down because COVID was spreading rapidly. But aside from that, yeah, that like moving away from my own personal little thing, yeah, that class was pretty cool in terms of actually like it teaches. I think this should be top first year. It teaches how
It
you
should
structure
100%.
your projects in a
Yes.
super clean and an interesting way. So like I've talked to like Alan Turner before, our like teacher for game dev. Like
Right.
I had him for 1 and 2, and he's even acknowledged that like yeah, we're changing the curriculum because I brought up my concerns with him, like in a meeting that I'm like about how this should be done and how there's not enough coders and stuff like that. And he said like yeah, we acknowledge that, and he apologized, not like necessarily admitting fault, like apologized that like I felt that way, but not
Mhm.
in this way. But like just to be like, yeah, like we're taking your comment into consideration, and like yeah, we're adjusting stuff like this. But like he said that like in terms of like a class like game production being so important is because we are all basically like ADHD chickens, 90% of us that are entering this field. And it's 100% that's been my experience, that most of us like want to focus on 10 things at once, and it just results into like 10 things breaking instead of us fixing one thing at a time. But games
Right.
production is
Yep.
that class that's like, hey, you need to sit down, you need to slow down, make a list of every asset that you need to make a list of every interaction that's going to happen in this game. Instead of just writing out your scope broadly like you do in game dev 1 or 2, like, oh, I want to have a game in which you collect swords in various dungeons, something broad like that, which I understand what your game is. But no, in games productions, are like, no, I want you to say how many swords you can collect in that game, how many caves are going to be in that game, what are you going to do in that cave, how many enemies are going to be in that game, how long do you think this game would take to beat, like what are the exact controls, like what are the exact interactions with each enemy, are they the same, are they different per enemy, what's a death look like, what's like in a walking around alive and accomplishing all your goals look like I need you to write all these down. And like we analyze essentially getting every task down on paper on Excel or Google Sheets through like the Scrum method, which has been like literally it's been the only way that I presented to like really organize a game. But it just makes so much sense to have like uh to have everything written down and out, so like you can assign people tasks, they can check in on a regular basis and say like, hey, I got that task done, now I'm going to move on to my next task, or to even lay out a task and declare like the dependencies of said task. So I don't know if you want to get into your thing. I guess like before I like continue on, we would really have to describe what Scrum is to explain like why this class has been like so impactful in terms of like real world like game design stuff. But I don't know if you want to talk about your experience before like
Well, overall, like Scrum, yes, was very important, but I think like I haven't really used like the in-depth version of Scrum moving forward. What I have used, and what I think what you're saying is what was really important, is the product backlog as a whole. I've used that multiple times since that class, and the product backlog is it's essentially writing down those tasks. It's like as a programmer, just for context, as a programmer, I can add X numbers to this counter, right?
yeah,
And
the
then
user
you
story
write,
stuff like that.
right? And then it's the task is add numbers to counter, and then you rate it based on how difficult it will be. You give it a number, and then once you're done, and you just move on to the next one, and you do those for a week or 2 weeks, depending on how you want it to be formatted. But just having that written down in a list of who's doing what, how difficult they think it will be, how close they are to finishing that, so you can plan accordingly. And just that alone gets rid of things like feature creep in your game.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets rid of you can solve problems before they like become problems. If your developer or designer encounters a bug, then everyone knows. Everyone can talk about it, everyone can see, and it just gets everyone on track. If I had those tools, being the producer in Game Dev 2, working on a Black Friday Blitz would have been a completely different game. I truly believe that. My personal experiences with that class making the game, we made the Math Racers game, which was basically a racing game. You solve math problems. The more problems you get correct, the faster you go. And why that game was impactful for me, like I know you had problems with your game with those other two dudes other than Jamie, because I remember that other two dudes, that one of those dudes was like play WoW in the back of the classroom like every fucking day, like every class. Yeah, he's just back there playing WoW. But the guys I was with, they really like lit a fire under my ass. So Evan, I believe his name was, one time we went to like the game lab, like in the fourth floor of the CDM, right?
Yeah.
And I just saw him there playing Need for Speed, just taking notes about Need for Speed for our game. I was so impressed by that like since then, every game that I've been playing, I've been taking notes on. Just like that alone. The other dude, Tomas, he coded all the game. He wasn't like super impressive. Evan impressed me more. And like our game was just like, I think, a rehash of something he already made. But just having those experiences of the product backlog was very, very helpful. Moving on from our second year, COVID hit. Everything kind of went to shit. We lost the access to our facilities, but I think our curriculum for both me and you changed kind of drastically. Just to read the classes that you're supposed to have in your third year, you're supposed to have solo game development, which we had together, advanced game design, play testing, game sound design 1, and data analysis.
And
so let's start
game mod workshop. I'm not sure if you're.
That's actually in the fourth year now
on
the website. They put that in the fourth year, but I know we also, actually I don't know if I took that with you, but I took that too in last year during COVID as well. So let's start with solo game dev, because I think that's the biggest one. It's like our mini capstone. The game that you worked on was amazing. I think it was really well done. So take it away.
Yeah. So I made a game that was outside of my wheelhouse, because to be truthful, I probably am murdering myself sometimes with the amount of work that I take on, but that stress, I don't know if it's like the cringy like anime kid in me from when I was young, but like it's my mind can only sort of progress really if I'm under like the intense gravity trainer that like Vegeta or Goku would like train under.
Right. Yeah.
So I really wanted to pick like a genre that I had never worked on for my solo game. And even Alan Turner, our professor, was kind of hesitant about what I was trying to accomplish. He was like, an RTS survival game, that's the mashup I want to do. He's like, survival maybe, but an RTS might be a little bit too much. Like, I hope you're really like confident in coding. And I was like, I'm not confident in it, but like I'll take the time to research it. And yeah, this was one of the classes where I had a lot of meetings with Alan, talk to him about like how I should go about doing this, or when essentially like if I should give up like about making an RTS. He would like I would talk to him and be like, do you think like by the end of this week, if for example, I couldn't get unit selection of traditional RTS controls of like drag a box over units, or like individual or shift click, and then like sending them to a place. If I can't get it done by this week, do you think I should just like quit on RTS? And he'd be like, quit necessarily, I don't know, but like you will be in a bad spot. Then I'd be like, okay. And then like the next entire week I would spend just working hard, just trying to figure out how to get these like RTS controls working, looking at YouTube videos or even looking at like old RTS games. And yeah, I would like figure it out. It would be buggy, but like I would still get something that I could work off of. And then building off of that, just so much research, being like, okay, let's create the product backlog of what we need to get done of all these features. I need to have resource collection. I needed to have enemies that you can fight with. I need to have armor items. I need to have helmet items. I need to have weapon items. I need to have
It's all the
crafting.
small systems.
Yeah,
I
like
suffer from that too.
like all these like subsystems and stuff like that that would go inside of that, and like just saying one thing would incur a large amount of work. So say for example, like, oh, I want to be able to have a I had like 4 buildings in the game, but just adding one building would add like 80 tasks. So it would be like, okay, I want to have a shelter building that when you sit inside the building, you consume a set amount of hunger status, and you heal for like double that hunger status that you just consumed, and it's every 3 seconds and stuff like that. But just setting that, it would be like, okay, so I have to make a building, I have to program the functionality of that, then I have to balance it, then I have to also create the animations associated with walking inside the building and then having the guy rest and then having to show the UI indicator it's consuming all this. And then also having to encounter situations like, oh, well, do I balance it to where enemies can wake you up from your shelter? Do I have to balance it to where enemies can essentially ignore you in that shelter? How many resources or units can you fit in that shelter? And just adding all this stuff. And the product backlog saved me sanity in terms of doing that, um, which was like extremely helpful.
So
And
you used one for this project.
wait, what was that?
You used the product backlog for solo game dev.
Absolutely, a product backlog was super important,
Interesting.
as well as with using. I had to create a product backlog for movements, mechanics, animations, um, models, and oh yeah, also special effects. This is like the first game where I actually like had to like look up special effects, which all this stuff I highly do not recommend in a capstone. In a solo game dev, luckily I had the acknowledgement that's like, hey, you're trying to make a full game here. But if you don't necessarily make a full game because of the pandemic, it's understanding that like, it might not be great. All right. As long as like you
Right.
can show demonstration of some skill and stuff like that, you're gonna get an A, you're gonna get a pat on the back, and this is a good thing for you. So like having that knowledge, it sort of didn't put the DEFCON 5 alert on as to taking on all this new stuff that I was learning. So, like I had to make effects for like the water. I had to make I had to make effects for like chopping down a tree with like the particle
Right, I remember
like
that.
that.
Right,
I had to
yeah.
make effects for getting hits. I had to make effects for like placing a building. I had to do effects for like the transparent preview of like a building being placed down. And this was all like each of these things seem trivial on their own, but like as you like delve deep into them, you learn ways you learn essentially skills that you can take from one particular task and apply it to another. So like a lot of the times with the effects, you can take a lot of like your fundamental understanding of like, oh, well, I made transparent water that necessarily casts a shadow based off of depth. That makes a puff of dust or like a smack on like a tree or like a resource construction cloud smoke look way more interesting if I have it show depth based off of shadows that are casting back. And then like learning like how you do that, you can start to sort of reverse engineer things like, oh, if I can necessarily like cast like like a shadow based off of the depth of the camera, like the distance of your player camera view to the actual distance of the land view that you're doing on. Maybe I can do something like a fog of war, where as the character is walking, they're interacting with like this invisible grid that I make in code to change the alpha value to necessarily clear up that area. And I was like, okay, so like I just learned how to make fog of war, and now I can clean it up by doing other like little Google things. So like to not explain the whole thing of my game, it's stuff like that was very interesting to be like, okay, I want to make an RTS and I want to combine these survival elements. I'm taking already established game mechanics, so I'm not venturing too far out into forbidden waters where I'm not literally trying to create a brand new game mechanic that's already done. I'm taking established things that I can then like do research on because since it's established, people have made like broken down
Mhm.
reconstruction videos on YouTube and on Reddit and stuff like that, that I can take that into my game and then I can adjust it with my own values, create my own sort of unique gameplay experience. And then like in learning how you create one mechanic, you essentially know the steps on how to create your own future mechanic. And I think that was like really the thing that solo game dev tries to hammer home is like, we know that you're going to take inspiration from other games. You're not going to be the most original person, but in learning how they made those original games, you can now take that knowledge to not only create your own original mechanics and ideas, you can also perhaps even take game genres that you've appreciated your whole life, like an FPS, and now necessarily like be like, oh, if you had an idea like, oh, well, I would prefer it if in Halo you sprint. I know nobody believes that, but it's an example off the top of the head.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
like you now know how to make an FPS because you've copied like videos on YouTube because that's what you said you were gonna do for solo game dev in a short time frame. And now you can make your own FPS and then like maybe remix it later with the knowledge that you gained from this. Like look at what Splitgate's done. They basically just combined Portal and Halo. And I think that's why solo game dev was so interesting is that they say like, yeah, you're gonna make a game, take a established genre, and then we'll talk about what you need in order to make it fit into that genre. And you're going to basically just be recreating aspects of game that you find.
Yes. Our third year, I think, overall for us was, at least for me, was very, very self-study reliant. I was just spending hours and hours on YouTube just looking at how to code things and do things because my coding experience is really, really bad. Like really, 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 really bad. So for solo game dev, I wanted to create a turn-based game, which was, turn-based game. That's really all I want to do, like old school Final Fantasy or Pokemon or anything like that. And I actually ending up finding a dude who has like 50 or 60 videos worth of tutorials on like how to recreate Pokemon in Unity. And that's all I followed. Like literally I just cheated and I just followed that dude from episode 1 to like current, and I'm still following it. And in that process I've learned so much about C sharp and just coding in Unity, and like some of the systems and things you could do in Unity that I would never fucking know. Like if we look, I think, out of what a lot of people did in this class, a lot of people did like platformers. There was that one dude who was just like, he didn't even have a 3D model with animations. It was just like a fucking like sphere and you were just collecting coins. Remember that game? Yeah, that dude. The dude that like the dude who did a horror game, he just did it in Unreal, which Unreal's really good at making things really pretty. Like that's I've recently found this YouTuber who's like recreating like the Simpsons arcade game, and to make it pretty, he just turns on ray tracing.
Oh yeah, it's
in like Unreal Engine 5. Yeah. So like Unreal's really good at that, and people love that game, and all that game was just him walking around just like activating triggers and playing animations. Probably the largest scale game was that chick's visual novel.
Oh yeah, Razan's visual novel.
And then after that, but most people just did platformers, which is like default very easy. But here we are, I feel like I'm doing a turn-based game and you're doing a RTS that has so many different subsystems to it that it got very complicated. Like even just coding those games, my game has types in it, so it has like the Pokemon types. Now it has like an inventory. It didn't have that at the time of the class. It has like trainers and NPCs. It has like a conversation system I had to fucking code in it. All the different animations weren't done with like Unity animations. They were done with like a plugin or something like that. What else do I have in there? Status effects. So there's actually status effects in my game, and those are actually just a pain in the ass to fucking set up, because not only do they have to be applied, but they have to like carry over per fights and all that, and HP and etc. All the UI. Oh, holy fuck! Like, and I'm still working on that. Just to teach myself to learn more C#. I'm still working on that, and that's what I liked about solo game dev. And again, it's hard to fucking do that in like 8 weeks. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, I think.
And
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh,
I
I
was
was
just
just
saying, like, I'm happy I cheated, kind of.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think that's really cheating because for most of like the instructional material I see online, like learning how these mechanics are made allows you to sort of like add your own spin to them. But I was just gonna say, like, yeah, with the whole 8 weeks thing, I understand why they don't just straight out say it. Um, that like, oh yeah, if your game's not 100% finished, you're not gonna fail the class. Okay, like you're demonstrating something,
Hmm.
like you demonstrate an effort. But I do kind of wish that like they did sometimes say that to like get people to venture out and like explore more. Like solo game dev, it kind of saved me from saying I don't want to be in the games industry anymore because I had just had like a terrible experience the past semester, as I said, with just like being
Right.
overworked. And I'm like, oh, I don't really like this. Like this is just so much work. And like even playing games, I would get like sort of stressed at being like God, I'm hitting puberty right now. And sort of seeing like a mechanic and being like, oh, I don't even know how I would approach that. Like this is like melting my brain just thinking about like, oh, if I gotta make a game and like I have to do this, like I don't think I could do it. Like it was just causing like general anxiety. But in playing solo game dev, like I get to set the terms and I gotta sort of like have the designer side of my brain talk to the programmer side of my brain and be like, hey,
Right.
we know what each other is saying. And it also helped that I had a lot more programming experience. I took like a lot of like data structures, electives, and stuff like that. So like I could really just sit down. And this is my advice for any designer or programmer: buy a whiteboard or something, or be really good with like MS Paint or something. Just being able to like
Hmm.
write stuff out as you're thinking about it, and then like drawing it. If you can't just like think how to do something in your head, like how two systems or two scripts or two variables and methods would communicate to each other. The whiteboard helps so much. And like it also just even helps for like paper balancing, where like you can just write everything out. And like you can even do it on a notebook as well, but for some reason my brain just likes doing it on a big whiteboard that I got.
Right.
It just like it shows you the fun and like the interesting part of game development, in my opinion, with solo game dev.
Yeah, I agree. And that's actually a great segue how this class kind of saved you into game modification, which I know we took separately, but for my experience for that was actually dreadful. I hated that. So, here we go. I don't know if I've told you this actually. So we worked on, and I could send you the game. We worked on this game called Piss Off, I'm Installing Software. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Which is essentially a game about closing pop-up ads.
Oh, I did help you with this.
There you go. Yeah, you helped me a little bit with that. So it started off a group of 3 of us, including me, and our teacher at the time wanted us to come up with like 50 ideas. And I should have known at like the start that this was gonna be a red flag, and then I was gonna be like real mad. But I was the only one who came up with 50 ideas.
Oh,
The other dude came up with like 30 something, and then the other dude just rolled out of bed, like literally rolled out of bed. He didn't have any ideas or anything. So here I am playing like trying to make peace, trying to like one of the beauty things about game design is that when you're in a room with multiple designers, you get to bounce ideas off of each other and eventually work towards a finished product. Of course, you're gonna have to fight for ideas or whatever, but you get to work together. Like if I have a idea and you have an idea and you have a part of your idea is really good, we can like combine it into my idea, right? So I'm trying to do this with these guys, and that just doesn't work out. So then I get assigned, when we start to make the game, to make the prototype. Now I'm coding the solo game dev class, which is easy because I have like the videos to kind of work off of. And then I'm coding this class, or coding this game as well, which I have no fucking clue how to do. But eventually I get the prototype working out, right? And I get it like, I think I showed it the prototype to you. Like that was it. Now, why I did all that work, these guys, right? undermined all that, and they decided to like work together to like make their own prototype, which ended up being the final game. So I was mad because like essentially like everything you look at in this game I had nothing to do with. Nothing to do with. The artist was cool, he did a good job, and I told them like, okay, this is how these systems work in Unity, change this, change that, whatever. And they just didn't fucking do it. I think if we were in person and it wasn't COVID, maybe things would be a little bit different, but that was my experience with game modification, especially in a class that you go into thinking you're gonna like mod Skyrim or Minecraft. Like I was prepared for that, for game modification, and then you don't fucking do that. So what were your experiences with game modification?
So I took game mod before solo game dev. So
okay,
I actually have a question. Did he just allow you to make a game, or like is this a like how is this a mod of a game? Like what game was modded?
there was no modded. It was just a straight up brand new game. His only requirement was that like it had to be small in scope, like something that you can only use your mouse to play.
Oh, so okay. So then our experience is going to be completely different. I actually had a mod, a Unity game. So we had to work off there's two templates that we use to work off. Actually three, but I forget what so we had to either mod the sort of the 3D platformer pack that comes with Unity. It comes with like a built-in level and some built-in like functions and like a character and stuff like that. We had to mod either that or an Unreal Engine template for a wave-based third-person combat game. And obviously I chose the 3D Unity platformer because I had more experience with 3D. And so we had four things we had to do. We had to add our own weapon. We had to then add our own enemy. And we had to then build our own level. And then it was three things. And then the fourth thing was kind of just document everything. So basically the experience was like, imagine that you were hired and you got to work on this game, but there was zero documentation by the team. And they're also instructing you as you're going through, you have to document the game systems and all that. This one was pretty relaxing programming wise because like I knew how the system worked in game. The more so frustrating part was I want to say it's my teammates, but in reality it was probably COVID. Just being separated from them, there was difficulty in getting like certain things on the product done. The hardest part was definitely with like animation stuff like that. We had to there's an issue with animations, and also our version control that we were using. I don't understand why there's not a class dedicated to teaching
to version control.
Because some of these people need it because it's very dangerous, especially some of the ways they set up the version control, where every folder is just from every team is accessible to everyone. Somebody could accidentally push to somebody's folder and like destroy everything. And I understand that like with version control, we can revert, we can go back, we have file history, stuff like that. But sometimes
we're using Perforce or GitHub.
We were using Perforce.
Perforce is always like, I don't want to use Perforce.
Yeah, but sometimes
it always seems kind of fucky.
Yeah, sometimes even our professors don't know how to use Perforce to like.
Yes, no one knows how to use Perforce.
But yeah, that was mainly the problem, was just trying to get people to upload stuff to Perforce correctly. Communicating on when these models should be done. My texture art is amazing. Like I've met so many cool artists. Through the
artists are like always never the problem,
and they always get their job done. They're always very communicative. They like get things done immediately, and they say, "Hey, I'm ready to go again for whatever you gotta throw to." Yeah, there was like two people that just kind of did. And
yeah,
this is
Sally was in my game mod class. And she was in a different group, but like I told her art has gotten really good. Like since the Black Friday Blitz days, it's gotten a lot better.
Oh yeah, I saw some of the art that she was making, and it was really good, like a huge improvement. That's the I guess that's sort of like another really cool thing about like having portfolios as you're like growing and as you're continuing your
Hmm.
classes is you do see an evolution, and I find that really interesting that like you can see people evolving in their work and like their knowledge of like what they know in their graphics or in their art or in their like programming. Like it's just interesting to like have these years go by super fast in my opinion, except for this COVID year. It's like super slow for
It
um
was pretty slow.
yeah, just grueling waking up for Zoom. You would think it'd be better without the commute, but like you lose so much interest when just like staring at a Zoom camera like 90% of your days. But yeah, it's just really cool to see that progress done. Uh and I guess like to the other side of that, it's also kind of like a shame when like you get paired up with people that you feel have not made any progress since the way it's the last time you've been with them. Like I've had some groups where I'm paired up with people that I've had in past groups. And the unfortunate thing is I don't really have a choice as a programmer because the way we have to divide these teams up is that hey, programmers raise your hand. Okay, we're gonna build the teams
Right.
around the programmers. Programmers have no choice because the you have to be
Yes.
uh the
Yes.
load bearing like pillar or
You're
wall
the
for the group.
foundation.
Yeah, you have to be the
Yeah.
foundation. And if you experience any problems, look, we're gonna give you more slack because we've done this in terms of like for your grading, but like we can't really do anything to fix your experience because like these people gotta take this class, which is like
Right.
I think is an undue burden, but I understand why like it has to happen. But
For me, it was the opposite because, like I said in this class, that I wanted to program just to improve it,
mhm.
and then my designers didn't do anything, and then they just started programming. So I was just like, "All right, fuck it," I got out of there. So moving forward, I want to wrap up the show because we've been going on for like an hour, which is like longer than I normally do. But I like doing those when we have really good talks like this. The future. We are going into our capstone. What are you looking forward to with capstone? What do you want to try and do? You got anything for it, or are you just gonna go into it blind?
Oh god, I'm looking forward to getting out of this house, being in person. It's gonna be so much easier to like communicate stuff there than it is like over
Right,
Zoom.
we haven't seen each other in a year, literally.
Yeah, so that's gonna be pretty great. Plus, being able to like actually go to offices with your professors. If you're listening to this, you're paying. We pay like $42,000 or $43,000 per tuition.
Yep.
When you're paying that money, realistically, I think that you're in your right to expect that, like, no, these teachers should be bending over backwards because of how much money you're paying them to like
I should have
mold
complained
you.
more. Yep.
Yeah, to like
These
mold you
teachers.
into like a god, a game development god. But in reality, you're paying $42, $42, $42,000 for the
Oh,
access. You have to go out there and you have to extract that knowledge yourself. It's basically the equivalent. Like you're paying the $5 for the library card. Now you got to go out there and you got to look for the book and you got to go read it. That is 100% what needs to be like shaken into like people going into college is that like you have to go extract that knowledge. So like if your teacher is not like you feel he's not being very attentive, go to his office hours. He's more than happy to talk to you. I talked to Alan. He's a super cool guy, and everything I bring up, he helps me. The problem is that, like a lot of these teachers, they have like a lot of other stuff on their plate, which I
yeah.
don't think is necessarily an excuse, but like
I think
it's something that you have to acknowledge in order to like get what you want and get what you need from these universities.
so. This is what I've noticed, right? So I just got back from Miami. I was dropping my sister off. She's going to University of Miami down there, and we were meeting her teachers, and her teachers just seemed a lot more passionate about helping the students grow and the curriculum and the teachers they're classing or teaching or classes they're teaching, excuse me. But they're also working on their own projects in the industry. She's going into music, so they're all musicians and they're all playing songs like that. I feel like a lot of the teachers we've had aren't really doing that. The best teachers we've had, I think, or at least for me, has been the game production teacher who was like, he was working on like the medical field for some company, but he was like making games for the medical field. And then the business of games, who was like the finance dude for NetherRealms. And those are the classes that I felt like I learned the most and I could ask the teachers like the most, and they actually came to you and would tell you like trade secrets and what's going on. With like Alan, for example, unless you chase him down, which is still incredibly hard, how many like emails I've sent this dude to like never get a reply, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah, it sucks because like when you talk to Alan, like once you get a hold of him, and if you can like sit down and like just speak with him, he's like a really cool guy, and he'll give you some really good advice. The problem is that like you do kind of have to chase him down, and like it's a twofold problem. I don't want to seem like there are definitely some professors at DePaul that like deserve like just shit, okay? But like I don't really want to go
Yeah.
into that right now. But like in terms of like to have a more better like discussion about this, let's be honest. Okay, there are a lot of kids in game design, including us to a certain extent. They're like very socially awkward. Okay, I say that we're some of the less socially
100%.
awkward because like we can
100%.
communicate with people very decently, and you know we're more just sort of like shy kids as opposed to socially awkward.
100%.
But and I can see a lot of times with like, for example, like Will Myers during my practical scripting class, he would always ask people, if you don't understand, you know, tell me
Yes,
right
yes.
now, and you know, I'll answer. I'll explain more. Nobody would like raise their hand.
Nobody answers.
And like
Yep.
I knew I had some of this like background knowledge in like programming, so I understood what he's talking about. But I could see sometimes when he would like lay out traps to gauge whether people were understanding or not, where he would explain a concept that requires the next concept that he's about to bring up and ask people, "Do you understand?" Just to be like, "Okay, they can't even understand because I didn't even tell them the correct thing necessarily, or like I told them something that there's no way they can know, and they're not raising their hand. Okay, let me explain again because I know you guys are not understanding." But like I could see him trying to
Mhm.
extract it out of people, and like I sympathize so much with that with that sort of issue that like the professors have
The
to deal with.
teachers have, yeah,
Yeah,
I do too.
but at the same time, I, I think professors need to like they need to sort of have that welcoming tone because there are a lot of people that do get left behind because of like how socially awkward they are. And you can only help them so much. I know that. But like
Mhm.
they are paying a decent amount of money at the school, and like I think you owe it to them to a certain extent to like at least just have the message of like, hey, um rather than saying like office hours are like 5 to 6 on Tuesday or something, be like, hey, office hours are available. You know, nobody signed up yet. You know, I'm always looking to talk to somebody. Come on down. I've had teachers in other departments say this in like philosophy, in like my philosophy electives, or even in my programming
Mhm.
electives. They say, hey, office hours are this day and that day. Nobody signed up yet. I'm willing to like if you come down, like I'm willing to help you with like the programming assignment or just to like talk about some other subject if like you guys are interested. Like to have that invite means so much, and I think that that's sometimes lacking in our professors because they're so busy with other things like the DePaul Game Studio or
Right.
like having to manage some other like having to go to classes back to back. It sucks so much when you want to ask a teacher something after class, but they're like, "Oh, sorry, there's not enough like game development teachers here at the Paul that can teach this class. I gotta head to another one immediately and like another building, and I have like 5 minutes. So like, sorry, I like
Right.
let's walk and talk real quick, but I gotta go." And that really sucks. Uh, yeah, that's like I guess like that's the two-sided way to like really talk about it. It's like there's not as welcoming of an attitude, but there's also a problem with the students like not necessarily wanting to engage as much with that. Like,
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I'm probably one of those problematic students. I never really went up and talked to my teachers too much, but that's because like I don't want to, if I hit a wall, like a hard wall,
it's hard to
then I
recover
will
from it.
ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like then I will ask them. But generally on my own, I just like to find the answer on my own, and I would do that. And I'll do it, and eventually, it's not that hard. I just find that answer. I never really had a problem in like practical scripting. I understood like kind of the basics of code. I didn't remember all of it, but I understood how to read it and just get through it. I remember actually one time I walked up to him and I asked like, okay, I've been trying to do like this laser system, and I don't know whether to use a raycast or just a normal hitbox, and it's just not working. Like, how does this work? And he was actually like more than happy to help me out and try and figure it out and solve it. I think I actually ended up doing like a hitbox rather than a ray trace, but still, that's just how I operate. Capstone wise, I think like that's my problem too. Like capstone wise, it's going to be very interesting with Alan Turner how this is going to work for 8 weeks, and then also with the group of people that we get. I want to work with you 100 fucking percent. But also like if we get others, like are we going to have those problems of them like not putting in the work?
Yeah,
Undermining, there's a lot of socially awkward people in our department, like a lot of like, you just kind of give them the look like, what the fuck are they saying?
yeah. So I think that's what really helps with like the product backlog. That it's just something you have to deal with. I don't think I think it's important that we learn how to deal with people like that. But like at a certain point, like you do kind of have to put your foot down. And like I actually had talks with Alan about that. Like, what do I do if people don't like participate? And it was basically like you have like a backlog of stuff to do. Like assign them a task on paper, because sometimes it's not that they don't want to. Sometimes it's not that they don't want to necessarily participate. It's just that like they don't know how, because they don't literally have the objective in their top right corner telling them what they should be doing right now.
Right, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, and I think that like now with the knowledge that we have, it's a lot more helpful. And since we're gonna be on campus, we can
actually like tell them.
yeah, we can talk to him, or like we can even like go to somebody. It's so much easier to explain something to someone, like how to use version control, if you're right there next to them pointing out how to do the steps, as opposed to like, I mean, you can screen share and I can kind of just keep like saying like, oh, you go in the top right slowly, like slightly no below that little
Yeah,
icon, stuff like that.
100%. Yeah.
But yeah, I think by this time in capstone, we don't have to deal with that, hopefully. But if it does become a problem, like we've learned through experience and through various classes how to deal with people perhaps not like helping or participating. And like to move aside from like roadblocks that might be other people, even if we encounter roadblocks, it's gonna be super helpful being on campus, because like yeah, don't feel embarrassed to like, go to like the tutoring lab. Like if I don't know how to do something, I'm just gonna go to the tutoring lab and be like, hey, can you help me work out like how I should program grappling hook or something, or like whatever, like, oh, should I create like, how would I go about creating a system like this? That like I don't care if people are gonna see me as an idiot, like I'm gonna extract as much knowledge as possible, because like
Right, you're 100% smarter than me. I'm hard-headed. I'm trying to go on YouTube figuring that shit
like
out myself. That's just
it's
how I
not even
operate.
like you just have to break that habit. Like I don't know what it was
Right.
with me not wanting to do it, whether it was like scared of being called stupid, or scared of whatchamacallit, not understanding the person, whatever. But I think what's probably helped me the most is that like, since I'm one of the only programmers in classes, a lot of the time other groups might come to me and ask me, hey Carlos, can you help me with this, like programming this? And I'll talk to them, and then I will also see that like they have the same struggles that I do, where it's like, oh yes, sorry, I didn't know that, like, I'm just stupid or something. And I'll be like, dude, like you're not stupid, like I don't expect you to know this. And like Will Myers is actually a lot like that. Whenever he would go around helping people with programming, they'll be like, yeah, sorry, I didn't sorry, like I must have not paid attention in class or something, like I know you talked about this. And he'll go, stop, I know I told you this information. You did absorb it. The problem is that like
You haven't applied it.
you're not gonna remember it immediately until you've applied it. He says,
Right.
even after I teach you how to do it right now, you're not gonna remember it, and that's okay. He's like, you're not going to. And it's like, wow, that's such a reassuring thing to hear from somebody. And like I think that is the one good thing that the Paul professors do is like, yeah, like it's not gonna be good. Like don't worry, guys. I know it's not gonna be good. Like everything's okay. Like it's like we'll work through it together. I think that's like the cushion that I have for the capstone project coming up is that like I know that even if it's not like great, um, I'm gonna learn something from it. And then like if there's an interview being like, well, I played your game or like it looked choppy or something like that, being able to explain why that problem is like that, and then like saying like, oh, now that I know like the problem, I would go about this fixing it. I think they'll see that as a lot more valuable than having a fully polished game or something like that. Like showing your ability to learn and like adapt rapidly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. All right, so let's wrap this up because I know we can talk for literally fucking eternity. 2 final questions. What's next for Carlos? What are you looking forward to, or what are you doing after you graduate? And do you feel prepared with everything that we've learned trying to break into the game industry?
So what's next is probably I got a lot of books that I gotta read. I've just finished this learning C# fundamentals by programming in Unity. Then I gotta start on the learning C++ book for Unreal. Um, Aside from that, it's basically just trying to get a winter internship to fill out that credit that I need at anywhere that I can go. And if
Mm,
that doesn't work out, well then, we got to go through a different avenue to fill that credit. Um but I have some ideas that I'm practicing right now a lot more of my coding and a lot more of my design. But past that, and even after graduation, I think I do want to work a little bit more on my writing skills. Because I like an idea for sort of like various amounts of like games that have like a narrative
right.
backing to them that would be like really cool for me to like actualize. Um, hanging out with you guys and hopefully doing some projects would be pretty fun, even if they're just little like side things. And
100%.
also, yeah, and yeah, I just want to I want to get more software experience under my belt, like with Blender, um, Unity. I already have a decent amount. I do want to learn Unreal because some of the stuff in Unreal 5 just looks so cool, and like
It does.
just to be able to like use some of those tools, like I'm at an exciting point right now where I'm seeing features in these or like even like new games that are coming out. I'm like, oh, like I know how they would be doing that. Like I know how I would program what they're doing. Or like I would see a feature in Unreal, like, oh, I know a super cool way that I could like create some sort of some sort of like mechanic with that and stuff like that. So like exploring a lot of more Unreal. Um, I'm hoping that COVID doesn't get worse. So like because to be honest, I've been kind of like in a slump of just like moving through things very slowly.
Hmm.
The fact that you're not really supposed to be going out and socializing too much, but uh, hope you got the vaccine, so going out there, trying to experience life, get some cool ideas for games. I guess the short and sweet of it is, yeah, I want to work on some personal projects and hopefully get a job anywhere that will take me or after graduation.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on this week's episode. I greatly appreciate it. I love having you on. Love talking to you. If people want to find you or your work, where can they?
Um, I post most of my work on itch.io. The name is DevCelos, DevClos. I also have a Twitter under that same name, DevCelos. I don't really tweet too much, but maybe I'll start as like a form of retaining information, similar like taking notes. That while I'm hopefully exploring Unreals. Um, and yeah, yeah, you can reach
All
out on
right.
those platforms if you want to talk to me. I guess.
All right. Perfect. So thanks for coming on. Hope we can do a follow-up show in the future.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on here and ramble off about my life and my experiences. And yeah, I
That's
can't
the
wait to see
point.
you in person.
All right. Yeah, me too. All right, and welcome back. I hope you guys really enjoyed this week's talk. I really enjoyed talking to Carlos. We had a lot of fun with that conversation, and we just started working on our capstone in our group as well. So look forward to news on our capstone game when I'm finally able and ready to talk about it as well. So let's get into the news. Starting with BetterTwitch.tv being added to YouTube. This is no surprise. One of the weakest parts of YouTube live streaming is its chat, and now we finally have a way to have our favorite emotes as well, just like in Twitch. So this is no big surprise, and well, here we go. This is just the start of it. We have big names moving towards YouTube and leaving Twitch. Bjergsen is returning to professional play in 2022. This is not a huge surprise if you look at some of the TSM Legend videos on how Bjergsen's reacting, and if you watch like the Healthy Gamer, the dude who does a lot of the psychology stuff in like video games, or the Psychology Gamer, I forget the exact thing, and if you go and you look for Bjergsen's episode, you can kind of get a glimpse of what he's thinking in his mindset and how he feels about coaching over the last year. He retired after going 0-6 at Worlds 2020. That was last year, and for this entire year he's been coaching TSM. So this is no big surprise that he wants to return to the team. He also wants to, test abroad, so maybe he wants to leave NA and not be in NA anymore. He wants to return home back to I believe he's Swedish, one of the northern European countries, I believe, and he wants to try a different team. But he also owns a part of TSM, so it's going to be very interesting how that works. Personally, I'm kind of disappointed that he's coming back to professional play, especially if he just comes back and just continues on TSM. If him leaving the scene and veterans moving out and retiring gives new people like Spica, for example, more times to shine on the team and become popular within the ecosystem that is League of Legends Esports. But if he stayed on TSM and was the face of TSM, Spica would never have the boom in his career and have as much as a voice that I think he would, or win like MVP of the split. We also have PlayStation news. So PlayStation had a state of play last Thursday. Also, that was the final chapter of Berserk being released as well. Definitely go give that a read if you're a Berserk fan. But we're starting off with Tiny Tina's Wonderland, which is a new Borderlands spin-off game. It is inspired by the Borderlands 2 DLC, which I think is of the same name. And this is going to be kind of big for Gearbox because they haven't had a huge hit. I think Borderlands 3 was overall somewhat of a failure, and I think that the last game that they come out, God's Fall or whatever, was also a failure because a lot of people saw that as a Warframe ripoff. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this goes. And they're kind of known for making somewhat small spin-off games, with Borderlands the pre-sequel as an example. We also have Uncharted Legacy of the Thieves collection coming to PS5 and PC early 2022. This is huge because now a whole market of people who are not able to play Uncharted, which is one of the big selling points of having a PlayStation, can now do that. We see this a lot where exclusives are becoming less and less of a thing, with PlayStation trying to push their old games onto PC, and same with Microsoft putting Halo Infinite on PC as well. Uncharted is one of the most fun action adventure games that you can play. It is a straight just train ride of fun, and it's one of the films that I think can be adapted into a film very well, because it's just Indiana Jones and it's just straight action, and I love these games. They were a lot of fun, and it gives us a way to archive Uncharted games, so you don't have to own a PS3 to play Uncharted 1, for example. Moving on, if you don't know, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is also being remade. So, a little bit of background history on this. EA, since they've gotten the title of Star Wars, has not been great. If you look at the height of Star Wars games, where we had Battlefront 2, we had Republic Commando, we had the Force Unleashed, all those games where they were just pumping out Star Wars games. That was under the direct control of Lucasfilms. Since they sold the IP to EA, we've only gotten, 2 Battlefronts and Star Wars Fallen Order, and that's it. So a lot of fans haven't been happy on how EA has handled the Star Wars IP. So Lucasfilms, again, or Disney, has taken it into their own hands and started up their own video game developing studio. And their first game that they're going to come out with is, in fact, a remake of a classic Star Wars game made by BioWare, and it's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Personally, my views on this, it's extremely safe. Very, very safe. There is no way you can fuck up this game, really. It's so safe, in fact, that it's disappointing to me that this was the first Star Wars game that they decided to make, especially with the Mandalorian and the Clone Wars that they've been pumping out recently. That they wanted to enter the gaming scene again. They decided to do something safe with this game. And we have news already that EA, or BioWare, who is the original maker of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, is not involved at all. So again, this is a very safe move by them, and we're just going to see how it goes. More PlayStation news. We have Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine, made by both Insomniac. This is going to be very interesting. Now, look-wise, technology-wise, I expect this game to be closer to Miles Morales. It shouldn't be they wouldn't have the time in terms of development, especially with COVID, to do anything spectacular and revolution and change the game. So expect it to be a continuation of what you've already had a taste of if you played Spider-Man 1, which was, in fact, a very good game. Insomniac has done a great job handling the Spider-Man name, and I think they're going to be a great job handling Wolverine as well, which is going to be extremely interesting. I suspect with Wolverine, it's probably going to feel a little bit closer to the Arkham games and less like flying around and swinging and acrobatic like the Spider-Man games do. Maybe a lot more heavier. So, but we'll have to wait and see. But I'm super excited for these games to come out, especially with Marvel wanting to break into the video game scene, with us seeing the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy and the people making the XCOM Marvel game. It's definitely going to be an interesting feat for the next couple years in terms of Marvel video games. And then we have the only reason I would buy a PS5 is God of War. That's the big one right now, is why I would make that jump, is for God of War 6 or God of War Ragnarok, as it is better known. Continuing the story of Kratos and Atreus in Norse mythology. This game was one of the best parts of the PS4 life cycle, and it's really interesting to see it continue, and we finally have a look at it. Now, gameplay wise, again, it looks the same as the God of War, or God of War 5, the last God of War that came out in 2016. So it probably will feel different, have a little bit more upgrades and improvements to it, but again, no big technology feat besides the power of the PS5, I would imagine. But continuing this story, I think now we're going back to more God of War roots, where we're not a father and son story anymore. It's going back to how Kratos is always just going to kill gods and be angry, and back to the more war part of God of War. But that is huge news. Definitely check this trailer out if you haven't already. In terms of esports, we have some Overwatch news, and they are off on break right now because they are going into playoffs from September 21st to the 25th, I believe. Starting on the 21st at 9 p.m. Central Time, we will have San Francisco Shot versus Shanghai Dragons, Philadelphia Fusion versus Los Angeles Gladiators, Washington Justice versus Dallas Fusion, and Atlanta versus Chengdu Hunters. Whoever wins those moves on. Whoever loses those goes to losers brackets until we get to the grand finals. So definitely look forward to those games moving forward. Then we have Valorant news because they are also having their international tournament in Berlin. We have Paper Rex versus Vision Strikers, and then we have Ascent versus Supermassive. Vision Strikers and Ascent moved over to the upper bracket finals for this division, and Vision Strikers won. And then Supermassive Blaze and Paper Rex are in lower bracket round 1, and then Ascent is in lower bracket finals with to be decided as their opponent. In the next league, we have Team Envy and Crew versus Vivo Keed, and Zeta Division versus KRU Esports. Team Envy moved forward and KRU Esports moved forward, and Team Envy won the finals. Zeta Division and Vivo KD are versing each other in the lower bracket round 1, and lower bracket finals is KRU versus to be decided. In the next bracket, we have Crazy Raccoon versus Gambit, and Haven Liberty versus 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves and Gambit both won their matches moving forward into the finals, where 100 Thieves defeated Gambit 2-1. And then the lower bracket finals, we have Haven Liberty versus Crazy Raccoon, and then Gambit versus to be decided. And then in Group D, we have Sentinels, who are 2-0, G2, who are 1-1, and F4Q, who are 0-2. And then that we have to wait later on for the next matches to be decided for people to move forward. Moving on to game releases, we have some big game releases this week, starting with Life is Strange. True Colors has now come out on the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Switch, Xbox One, Switch, and Stadia, as well as PC. We also have NBA 2K 2022 coming out for the same exact platforms as well. And Tales of Arise came out for the PS5, Xbox Series X, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, all on this September 10th. The biggest game that just came out right now would be Deathloop, which is made by the same people who I believe made Dishonored. That came out for the PS5 and the PC September 24th. And then we also have some other things to look forward to in this month, like Pokemon Unite, Diablo 2, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot for the Switch, Ghost Runner for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, New World, Amazon's MMORPG, Darksiders 3 for the Switch, and Kojima's Death Stranding's Director's Cut for this month as well. So a couple good releases moving forward. Anyway, that's going to conclude this week's talk and this week's news of It's Not a Sport. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Carlos. You can find all his stuff again if you go to that section of the talk. You can find his work and contact him for his work. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to work on this capstone. So, quick reminder, as always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. And check out our website and our YouTube for all of our previous shows and previous seasons, as well as articles up on the website. This has been your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb.